Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we're checking out the monoblue tempo archetype, which historically has been a powerful archetype in Best of 1 standard, but recently hasn't seen a ton of play until they introduced the Belion the Parched. In paper this is Hydro-Man, a 2-mana 2/2, saying whenever we cast a blue spell it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, assuming he's a creature, and that's relevant because of the next line of text. At the beginning of your end step, untap Belion until your next turn he becomes a land and gains the ability to tap for a blue mana. So it's a creature that has kind of pseudo prowess, if you will, and then during the opponent's turn it's going to be a land, so we can immediately tap it for mana the same turn we cast it, because when it turns into a land it's no longer a creature, so it's no longer affected by summoning sickness. So we can play this turn 2, maybe flash in a 1-drop during the opponent's turn, and then on turn 3 we could already cast a 4-drop during the opponent's turn when Belion turns back into a land, and that's perfect of course for setting up an early Enduring Curiosity, which is a great card to play in this style of flash tempo deck, where we can play stuff at instant speed, and all our small flyers now turn into card draw engines, as we get to draw a card whenever we hit the opponent with one of our creatures, and that's for each creature that's hitting the opponent. So this is very nice alongside the Fey Bloom Trick from Foundations, a 3-mana instant making a pair of 1/1 fairy tokens, and we also get to tap target creature an opponent controls. So very nice tempo play against other aggro decks. Can maybe tap down an attacker to prevent some damage, or we can even tap down a blocker to get in with more of our creatures and maybe draw more cards with our Enduring Curiosity. And then rounding out the deck, of course, as a blue tempo deck, we want some cheap counter spells. We've got the full set of Spell Stutter, counter unless you pay 2, and 1 additional mana for each fairy we control. So that also makes a lot of sense with 4 copies of Fey Bloom Trick, making a pair of those fairy tokens. Then I'm also playing 4 copies of Along a River's Pull, which is double blue for essentially an Essence Scatter, but it has the additional ability to gift a card to then counter any spell the opponent casts. So against creature decks, this is just a slightly harder to cast Essence Scatter, but against control decks, at least it's not a dead card, so we can still gift a card to maybe counter a key removal spell or a board wipe to make sure we still take over the game. And then we have a few more answers to creatures in the form of some bounce spells with Into the Floodmaw. Can also gift a fish to bounce any non-land permanent, so again, not a dead card against control necessarily. And then the Floodpit's Drowner can also be a nice tempo play, tapping an opposing creature down, putting a stun counter on it, and then as a 2/1 can also maybe hit the opponent, triggering our Curiosity, but can always decide to shuffle it back into our library and get rid of the opponent's creature that had a stun counter on it. And then we've got some more cheap flyers, which are also good with the Curiosity. Spyglass Siren, making a map, can also maybe upgrade one of our 1/1 flyers into a 2/2, or can draw more lanes. And then Spectral Sailor also has a nice mana sink for 4 mana to draw a card if we don't have anything else going on. And then I'm also playing the full playset of Opt as another 1 mana instant we can maybe cast in the same turn as we cast Belion, as we can play it during the opponent's turn. Just gives the deck a bit more consistency, so we can find whatever we need in certain matchups, whether that's more threats, more removal spells, or maybe more counter spells. And of course, Curiosity, another key card we want to try and find in every game, so that also helps there. And then last but not least, 2 copies of Tishana's Tidebinder, which can be flashed in, maybe counter an activated or triggered ability, maybe shut down any creature that's affected by it as well. So that's another versatile answer, also pretty good against popular Reanimator strategies. So besides our 8 counter spells that can maybe counter a Kivero, we can also counter the triggered ability with Tishana's Tidebinder, so that's another good answer. And then our mana base is 21 lands total, since we of course also have Opt to smooth out our draws and Spyglass Siren to explore. Need plenty of islands to support the double blue on Belion and Long River's Pull, but I still wanted to make room for 1 Soulstone Sanctuary as a mana sink in case we're flooding out a bit, turning into a 3/3 creature with Vigilance, also has all creature types, so that can also come in handy for Spell Stutter. And looking forward to future expansions in Standard, we'll get a Lorwyn at some point, which I'm sure will have plenty of blue fairies that we can also add into the archetype. Possible the deck will then pivot into blue-black, but either way the archetype is definitely primed to get a few more upgrades. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw. We have what looks like a Keeper. Turn 2 Belion can maybe set up turn 3 Curiosity if we draw an extra land. Facing turn 1 Mountain. Our hand might be a little weak to a very aggressive deck. Possible they have a burn spell to take out our 2/2. Now if they tap out for Slick Shots, this will turn into a land, so there's no window for them to take it out. That being said, Slick Shot can also deal a lot of damage, so I could just use a Drowner to tap it down. Or I can get this going and next turn have access to 4 mana. That's probably better. Even though we could take quite the hit. Tidebinder can also shut down the Slick Shot by countering the triggered ability. Hellkite gets in for 4. Alright, so attack for 2. Pass with mana up. And then I think we let our opponent attack. With Tidebinder we can minimize the damage, even though they might still get 2 triggers off. A Lightning Strike to the face. So let's say they have another Lightning Strike, then we're taking 11 down to 3. That's a lot of damage. So I think I do Tidebinder here. Counter the trigger. Alright, opponent's going to Burst Lightning the Tidebinder. Still get to reduce the damage we take here. Looks like there's more. And Dreadmaw's Ire. Well, that would have been lethal without Tidebinder, or close to it. Now I definitely need to Drowner the Slick Shots. Can always counter the Hellkites. So then I can afford to opt. Because if I Drowner... Suppose I could Drowner now, but it's better to do it in their upkeep. If I were to Drowner now, I'm still short of Curiosity. So yeah, I think it's just opts to get in for an extra damage. Spell Stutter seems reasonable, although maybe I should look for more flying creatures. Because their opponent can maybe pay for a Spell Stutter if they are just casting a bunch of burn spells. And get you for 3. Yeah, it's a shame we couldn't get the Curiosity going, but that's what you get playing against mono-red aggro. Don't always have time to deploy your expensive spells. So Hellkite, I'm happy to counter. And Slick Shots can take a nap. So now I think we main phase Curiosity. Hit for 5, draw 2 cards. Hope to find more interaction. We did. And drew all 3 copies of Belion, that's why I'm not running the full playset. But it is great when it works. Now I could Drown or get rid of Slick Shots. But we can probably just attack for lethal. Or use Floodmaw to bounce it later. Screaming Nemesis is scary. So that's another must bounce. Possible they have a burn spell to target the Nemesis, just a Bastronaut. Okay, that's fine. So I imagine they're attacking. They are not. So I don't have to Floodmaw bounce Nemesis. Although currently I have to be attacking on the ground to get in. I think it's fine to take my draw step first, that way we get to pump Belion with Floodmaw. So I'll start here. We drew Siren, which at least gives me a blocker for the Slick Shots, so that helps. So I think we're fine to attack. Could have maybe considered casting this before attacking just to present lethal. Because then our opponent was able to just take it, although it was still risky. If we had an instant, they would have been dead. Alright, now with the Drowner we should be safe enough. So play Siren. Could maybe opt first. So if we had an opt, this would have been lethal. Spell Stutter I'll keep. So then I can still play Siren, Drowner, keep up Spell Stutter. So we should have most angles covered. So Nemesis counter, opponent can pay for it since we don't have any fairies, but then they're tapped out. And then I can just Drowner the Nemesis and that's game over. Alright, sweet. So yeah, even against mono reds, if we're on the draw, thanks to the extra mana from Belion, we managed to get a lot of value out of it. And yeah, it doesn't matter too much how we block, if at all. And our opponent scoops it up. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a reasonable hand. Could use some actual counter spells. For now, play Siren. Might have to explore to hit more lanes. Opponent's got the early elves. A good target for the Drowner in their upkeep. So we deal with it for multiple turns. They're unlikely to have an instant they want to cast in their upkeep. So then the elves would be tapped down for 2 turns here. They are black, green, and another elves. So it could be kind of a demon's mid-range deck. So good thing that we drew the long reverse pull. I'm fine to trade the Drowner for an elves. And then could either explore or we can play Sailor. I think I do explore here. Don't need opt, but then I can still cast opt to maybe hit land 4. Because I want to make sure we can curve into the Curiosity next turn. Again, fine if these trade. Opponent accepts. So they weren't able to ramp despite the 2 elves. Alright, the Revenant is kind of a must counter here, unfortunately. So then I don't get to opt, so I may not find land 4. And I also don't get to add another flyer to the board to maybe draw with Curiosity. But we drew a land anyway, so I'm just gonna jam since we're out of counter spells. Now they can still use the Revenant out of the graveyard to good effect. But at least we're on the front foot here. Deep Cavern Bats is pretty effective, but still beatable. They need to deal with the Curiosity, ideally by exiling it. They did take our Legend. Still 2 mana remaining. And we get to untap. So let's go ahead and get in. If they have removal, I can maybe opt and find a counterspell in response, which is why I didn't opt first. Can also Sailor activate to draw. But I think I prefer opting. Alright, so sadly only get to draw 1 card here. Anything good? Another land. Alright, so maybe a little bit punished for casting the opt as opposed to leaving mana for Sailor. At least if they play another bat, we don't have anything to show them. Now the Acolyte, 4/4. The lifelink also quite relevant when they're at 8. And the bat attacks. So they are kind of offering the trade. They would lose 1 life, gain a life, draw a card, so just basically draw a card. But if I keep the Sailor, I also get to draw an extra card. Is that better? If I trade, they get a 2/2, which can maybe chump the Curiosity. think I'm better off keeping the Sailor in play. Hopefully find some interaction here. Alright, a Fey Bloom trick is pretty good. Just gonna tap down their lifelinker, attack, hope to find some other bounce spell to take the lifelinker out once again. Well, at least we drew a non-island land. But yeah, a lot of lands here, so definitely flooding. Drew almost half of our lands in the first 18 cards. I guess we scryed a few times to the bottom as well. Because yeah, if we have another trick, or a Drowner, or a Flood Maw to bounce the Acolytes, it's probably game over. Now we're still in reasonable shape, but our opponent could stabilize. Another bat is gonna see what we're working with. Our opponent's been struggling to hit their land drops. But of course they also traded away a bunch of elves. Alright, there's a Flood Maw we needed earlier. If I attack, they're likely trading bats for a fairy. But we would still draw some cards. Could also get in with a Sanctuary. It's probably worth it at this rate. And we can punish a double block. Would much rather bounce Acolytes, given the chance. Alright, so this seems fine to me. And a Drowner's excellent too. Alright, so those are the cards we needed earlier. Now we're fine to pass. Drowner the Acolyte, most likely. Keep our 1 mana plays available. And an Uroboroid. That one I can just bounce with Flood Maw before it triggers. And that should be pretty much game over. And there we go. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Facing blue-white Authority, so yeah, that's going to gain them quite a bit of life. At least our build of control has counter spells that are versatile. Can counter non-creature spells with it as well. Never mind, it's more of a mill deck. So, get in for 1. Can play Drowner end of turn. Gotta keep Long River's Pull to counter big mill effects. For now we'll play Drowner before the opponent gains an extra life. And our opponent had a Get Lost. So I might go exploring soon. Can explore at least once, I think. Tidebinder can also be used to counter the Exhaust ability. Curiosity will keep on top. So, yeah, I think I just make a huge creature here, as opposed to doing anything else. Of course, our opponent can mill the Curiosity, so then I don't draw into it. But there's not much I could have done about that either. Alright, we get to untap, so we drew the Curiosity. So now I'll just hit for 4, probably wait until end of turn to play a Curiosity, even though we maybe miss out on a card draw. Allows me to keep up my other instant speed plays. Could use Tidebinder right now on the Monument, but I would rather play Curiosity. Somewhat likely that they have their own counterspell. But they're taking 4 each turn. Three steps. Okay. Now Spell Stutter. So yeah, if we can just protect this Siren with our 2 counter spells and a Tidebinder, we should be okay. Tidebinder to counter the Monument might still be worth it. Split up. So let's Spell Stutter. And then if I play Tidebinder, they gain 2, but next turn I attack for 7, so that should be lethal. And our opponent scoops it up. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a reasonable hand. Turn 1 Siren. We'll see if we need to keep up a long reverse pull or if we can go exploring turn 2. Opponent with Infestation Sage, so likely the black-white sacrifice deck. Alright, so I think I'm fine to keep up long reverse pull, especially if our opponent plays the white 2-drop with Mobilize, which would not let us cast spells in their turn. If that resolves, we're going to have a very hard time. It's going to be a Blood Witch for now. Could still counter. It's not the biggest threat. I think we actually let that slide. Want to counter Sacrifice Outlets and the aforementioned card. Now, I could either Trick or I could Explore. Trick sets up Curiosity better. Exploring makes it more likely that I can cast one in the first place. So, tricky spot. I think I do Explore. Ideally, we also get to counter. Say no to another Trick. And hope we get to leverage this. Sephiroth also a good one to counter, because they would sack Sage, make a flyer, which could be annoying. Yep. Always good to think ahead about which creatures you're willing to counter. So if they play something that doesn't fit that description, you can very quickly pass priority and they don't necessarily suspect anything. Now sadly we did not draw a 4th land, but we drew a backup counterspell. And Gorehound's fine. If our opponent goes to attackers, I think we let that slide because they could still cast a 2-drop second main, so need to keep a counterspell for it. And then now we can Trick end of turn. And then I think we slam down Curiosity just to draw 3. The combo of Trick into Curiosities, great. No land for next turn, but we're somewhat likely to find one. Now we've got bounce spells to interact. So I'm liking my position. Graveyard's not very full yet. Sephiroth will make a 1/1 flyer. But yeah, we want to kind of leverage our tempo advantage. Efficiently bounce their creatures while getting in, drawing more cards. Keep our counter spells for the more impactful cards. Alright, no land yet, but should be able to draw one. How do I want to attack? Could keep Curiosity back. Probably I'm gonna end up bouncing Sephiroth. If they trade for Curiosity and Sephiroth, that's fine. Could also bounce the Flying Token, so they have fewer blockers. And then I get to draw more cards, likely find more answers. Yeah, that's probably fine, actually. Opponent is gonna chump. There's also a miner in the graveyard, but they can't get it back right now. Alright, somehow it didn't draw land in what must have been like 8 or 9 draw steps. Can still cast a trick, or we can Drowner plus maybe Spectral Sailor. I guess I can opt and hope to draw land. That's maybe still worth it, although if I fail, I'll be pretty disappointed. Wow. Well, at least we drew a Spell Stutter. So, discard a bunch to hand size, I guess. Could also Drowner tap down Sephiroth before it gets a chance to attack. If they raise the past, it's not a disaster here. Alright, so what am I discarding? Maybe another Curiosity. A pull. And that's good enough. And we'll see what our opponent does. Another Infestation Sage. That's fine. So the current plan is Drowner, tap down Sephiroth. We'll see if that needs to change. Ooh, Zealots. Zealots problematic, because that lets them transform Sephiroth here. So then I think I just Spell Stutter it. And then I can still attack with Sephiroth. That's 5. Plus a Drain for 2 more. That's close to lethal, but... yeah, if Zealot resolves, we're just pretty dead. Can always drown or tap down the insects. There's a land we needed. Okay, so I have how much damage on the board? 8, points at 13. What's the most defensive play I can make? Probably Drown or Sephiroth. Yeah, the problem here is with both Blood Witch and Sephiroth, if 2 creatures die, I'm also dead. So I may not be able to keep up any counter spells, and instead I can Drown or tap down the insects, attack, and then use a trick to hopefully stay alive. Yeah, is there any point in leaving creatures back? They deal more damage if their creature dies compared to if it hits me. But now the problem is if they have another Zealot, or raise the past to get Zealot back, we just lose. Alright. And the turn. Discard 2 lands. So we're dead to a few things. Voice of Victory is going to force my hand right now. So I think we just trick, tap down Sephiroth. Technically, if Sephiroth attacks, I could jump it, but then Sephiroth also triggers. Blood Witch only triggers if their creatures die. Yeah, I think we got a trick. So if they have a Zealot, we're dead. Serve on Dam. We can beat. So if they attack, we just take 2. Fall to 1. And then now we have 5 in the air. So we can cross the finish line. Super close game. But there we have it. So yeah, Voice of Victory did end up showing up, but a little bit late. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand's a little awkward with our one-off Sanctuary. Only playing 1 copy because of the Parched being double blue, of course. That being said, I think we can still try it. Because, yeah, let's say we have this hand -1 Parched. I think it would still be a keeper. Still not amazing since we don't have any counter spells. But can always use the colorless mana to sack a map token. Could also opt to improve my odds of a turn 2 Belion. So there were a few choices. Turn 1 plains, another Drowner. So I think I'm in favor of Explore plus Opts. Gotta say no to the trick, unfortunately. Just need lands. But then Belion would immediately let us flash in the Drowner. Opponent with a Get Lost, so it is blue-white control. Keep the island. So against control, we really just want to find our counter spells. Maybe Enduring Curiosity if we can sneak it into play at some point. Could go exploring. I think I would rather add Drowner to the board for a bit of added pressure. And then maybe next turn we can explore. Opponent's gonna consult in response. So that leaves them pretty tapped out if we were to draw Enduring Curiosity, for instance. Not gonna animate Sanctuary because of the fear of board wipes, of course. But yeah, can go exploring. This seems like a fine target, because if they remove it, we have a backup. And happy to keep a Spell Stutter. Can go again. Hit for 6, so the damage is adding up. And this plays around sweepers nicely. So it can be a nightmare for control decks. And those counters also go a long way. Opponent's going to consult again, no need to counter. We'll fight over the removal spells. Get to flash in another Drowner, so we're close to attacking for lethal, and our opponent's just going to scoop it up here. They know we're going to draw a counterspell. I had another one in hand. So yeah, this seems very tough for control once we resolve Belion, if we have a decent hand. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand seems reasonable. Siren, turn to keep up Spell Stutter, and then we've got a few tricks up our sleeve. Alright, opponent might be on a similar strategy. I don't think I'm Spell Stuttering their 2-drops, so then I prefer using the map. Can still play the Sailor. And an Opt I may not have time to cast with double trick. Alright, opponent's got build around here, so that's going to turn into a land right away. Do we offer the trade? I don't think so, I'll just take the one. So we'll hit them for 3. So our opponent could have 4 mana in my turn to maybe cast an Enduring Curiosity. Not opposed to tricking to tap this down. I'm okay if they counter it. Also an argument for tapping the flyer down if they end up exploring onto it and making it a 2-2 on defense. But then I can maybe pivot and tap it down with a Drowner. Opponent found a land anyways. So they still have 3 mana up. Okay, let's go ahead and attack. I'm okay trading away the Sailor. They could have their own trick. Yep. Could fight over it. The main concern is their opponent resolving Enduring Curiosity. But maybe we can leverage this early advantage. Opponent trades. Should opt to try and hit my land drop. A long river pull seems fine. So we are ahead in the race. Will they main phase anything? Nope. Get to untap, so we have Counterspell and Drowner available. Opponent's got their own Drowner. Yeah, I think we counter it. Can pay 2 if they have the fairy trick. Just another Drowner instead. So Siren doesn't get to attack. Could main phase my Drowner, just so they don't get to shuffle away the Siren. Yeah, I don't hate that idea. Opponent's at 9, we have another trick. Not gonna block since they can potentially grow this at instant speed. Opponent's got the fairy. Can also potentially target it with the Drowner. But then we have to pay the ward. Find a Floodmaw. So, yeah. Can go ahead and attack. If they animate Sanctuary, I can tap it down. Opponent's got another Drowner. Yes, that resolves. Tap down my Drowner. So I could spend my whole turn just getting rid of their sleep-cursed fairy. Because later trying to tap it down with a trick is not going to be all that helpful when they can just untap it for 2 mana. So this might be my best opportunity. Even though I don't get to add more flyers to the board. And we'll try and keep up the pressure. Next turn, flying over for 4. Okay, opponent gets in for a healthy amount. So if I go to attackers, I can trick the Sanctuary, maybe bounce the Parched, and then we should be alive. If they have their own trick, we could be dead. So maybe set an upkeep stop. Could also bounce the Sanctuary, to be fair. Just maybe better. Could have also left one fairy back. Because if they counter this, we die. But that resolves. So then we should be good to go. Drowner's attack. Seems safer to take it, Although what if they did draw into their own trick? They can tap down Siren, have 2 blockers, fall to 1. So then I would need to draw into either a counter or a removal spell. But if I trade, then a simple bounce spell can save them, or another Drowner. What if I trade 1 away? Then I still beat a single removal spell. Yeah, that's maybe fine. Sailor main phased. Could activate to draw. And I'll main phase the opt, maybe find something useful. Floodmaw seems useful. GG's. So can go to attackers. Don't need to bounce until our opponent makes a move. And there we go. Very close game. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with what looks like a keeper. Turn 1 Siren, turn 2 Belion can still opt. And then as always looking for Enduring Curiosity. Opponent on maybe the multicolor control deck. Spell Stutter is probably good enough to keep still. And a long reverse pull. So let's go ahead and play land first, then explore onto Belion. And I'm gonna decline another long reverse pull since we're mostly gonna be countering non-creature spells, which does require gifting a card. So Spell Stutter is going to be a little bit more useful. They do also have the uncounterable removal spell for 4 mana. Not going to have many creatures to tap down with a Drowner, so may as well run it out here. Maybe they counter it. 3 steps, okay. And that's not what we wanted. Alright, so just getting in for 4. That's not a ton of pressure. Especially if they have the uncounterable removal. As we draw another Spell Stutter. I mean, if they don't have that removal spell, we might be okay, but it's kind of the signature card for the 4-color control deck. Alright, they took it. Belion no longer targetable, and our opponent's going to consult. Normally I wouldn't fight over this. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't, although Consult can find that uncounterable spell, so that's a reason to still fight over it, especially while they're tapped out. So, can't quite attack for lethal, unless our opponent puts multiple spells on the stack. So they're at 2. They're gonna Mystical Teachings, which would find the aforementioned removal. So I'm gonna say no. And hope that one last counterspell's enough. And our opponent concedes, awesome! So yeah, good to see this mono-blue tempo deck in action. And yeah, Belion definitely impressed. Seems tailor-made for the archetype, of course. The deck sometimes relies pretty heavily on finding a card like Enduring Curiosity to top off its curve. Without it, the deck can feel a little bit underpowered. There are maybe some other 4-drops you can add, like the Stoic Sphinx, I believe, another flash creature that's pretty good. But of course, the more 4-drops you add, the clunkier the deck becomes, and the weaker it will be in the face of aggro decks, where you want your deck to be lean and mean. So there's always a balancing act, but I think the deck should also translate reasonably well into best of 3, so you can try it there as well, and then you can always customize the deck with more targeted counterspells and more threats where needed. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.